Truth, where illumined minds meet. The Original Wisdom Teachings of Jesus. Quest Series 5, Video Number 2, presented by the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation. If the teachings of Jesus were correctly interpreted, if the teachings of the churches which use his name were freed from the accretions and veiled materialisms which he never taught, the Western people would then be so effectively helped by their religion that it would undergo an intellectual rebirth. The name Christos, or Christ, meant our higher self, and was used in the same way that the term overself is used today. Jesus Christ meant that the man Jesus had been Christed by becoming consciously fused and unified with his overself. I am the way, the truth, announced Jesus. Who is this I? In the narrow and shallower sense, it is the Master. In the broader and deeper sense, it is the Christ self within, the spiritual consciousness. God is in your very being. To know God as something apart or far away in time and distance, or as an object outside yourself, separate from you, that is not the way. It is impossible. Jesus gave away the secret. The divine is within you. The Christ self who was in Jesus is in us too. The miracles of Christ were an expression of special power, manifested by him in virtue of his special mission to humanity. The argument as to whether a living master alone can save us, or whether a dead one can also do so, is a fallacious one. No one is saved by another. Your own soul is your real savior. When you believe that a master, living or dead, is saving you, your own soul is actually at work within you at the time, but is using the mental image of the master to serve as a focus point for your side, that is, the self-effort side of the process. Thousands who never knew the living Jesus have felt the real presence and dynamic power of Jesus enough to convert them from sinful to godly lives. It was the idea of Jesus which they really knew, not the man himself, as it was the grace of their overselves which was the true presence and power they admittedly felt. They concentrated their faith on the idea, but the reality behind it was the unknown overself. They needed the idea, any idea, as a point in their own form, time, and space personal consciousness, where the formless, timeless, placeless, impersonal soul could manifest itself to them. You will come to recognize that you have only one problem. How can I come into awareness of and oneness with my true being? For it is to lead you to this final question that other questions and problems have staged the road of your whole life. This answered, the way to answer all the other ones which beset you, be they physical or financial, intellectual or familiar, will open up. Hence Jesus' statements, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added unto you." And, "To those that have enlightenment shall be given what they personally need." Jesus likened the kingdom of heaven to a grain of mustard seed, which was a simile among the Jews for anything exceedingly small, Why did he do so? Because in its first onset, the kingdom is not an experience, but an intuition, and the latter begins as an exceedingly faint and tiny leading. For centuries, theologians have argued about the meaning of Jesus' declaration that the kingdom of heaven was at hand. Most of them have given it a historical interpretation. Only those who could approach the mind of Jesus have given it a mystical interpretation. For only they can see that he meant that the kingdom of the Overself is really as close to us as is our own hand. "Wilt thou be made whole?" asked Jesus. When you no longer look only to the established tradition offered you by others, but also and more deeply into your own inner consciousness, you are then following the way pointed to by Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu. For this is how and where the soul reveals itself. If anyone will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross daily, and follow me. This is that crucifixion of the ego, which is true Christianity, and which leads directly to the resurrection in the reality of the Overself. Regard your worst, most irritating trouble as the voice of your Overself. Try to hear what it says. Try to remove the obstructions it is pointing to within yourself. Look on this special ordeal, this particular trial, as having the most important significance in your own spiritual growth. The more crushing it is, the more effort is being made to draw you nearer to the Overself. At every point in your life, from one event, situation, or contact to another, the infinite intelligence provides you with the means of growth, if only you will get out of the egoistic rut and take them. He that loses his life shall save it. It is necessary to point out that there is no escape from the price that has to be paid for the highest attainment. It is only by deliberately avoiding egoism, to take the desires and passions, the greed and hates out of your life, to learn the art of living in utter independence of externals and in utter dependence on the Overself. Thus, the sorrows of life on earth are but a transient means to an eternal end, a process through which we have to learn how to expand awareness from the person to the Overself. The philosophical discipline is intended to overcome this egoism, or, as Jesus said, give up yourself if you would find it. No one can serve two masters, said Jesus. Thus he rejected all indecision of will. In the end, you must come to yourself, your diviner self, your essential being. And where shall you look for it, if not there where Jesus pointed? Within, not outside in some other person, however high his repute as guru, not to some book, however sacrosanct its scriptural authority. Both teacher and book must, if loyal to the highest, also direct you inward. It is from the Overself that every true prophet receives their power. I of myself am nothing, confessed Jesus. I have no power within myself, but only in the Father. Why did Jesus say, I and my Father are one, but yet a little later add, the Father is greater than I? The answer is that Jesus the man had attained complete harmony with his higher self and felt himself one with it. But the universal Christ principle will always be greater than you. The Overself will always transcend the person. Why did Jesus give the opening of the Lord's Prayer as Our Father and not as My Father? Was he not trying to get his disciples away from the self-centered attitude to the cosmic one? Was he not widening their outlook to make them think of everyone's welfare? Wisdom is latent in the bad as well as the good person. Jesus spoke to sinners as freely as to those of better character. In meditation practice, metaphysical study, and right conduct, we have the triune path which brings satisfaction, peace, wisdom, and true prosperity. Jesus taught us all this long ago, but unfortunately, his message has been largely misunderstood, distorted, and even falsified. However, he also taught that we are all the children of God. It is a father's business to look after his children. Despite the tragedy and horror of our times, those who have eyes to see can still see the divine arms enfolding us. Despite the presence of monstrosities in the world, there is also the presence of the Overself, beautiful, radiant, benign, and indestructible. Those who have conscientiously practiced mystical meditation and metaphysical reflection, purification of character, and unselfish service, and yet seem to be remote from the goal, what are they to do? They have then to follow the admonition of Jesus. Ask, and ye shall receive. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. He meant ceaselessly repeated knocking at the door within yourself. No amount of knocking at the doors of organizations outside yourself will bring this result. You have literally to ask for grace out of the deep anguish of your heart. We are all poor. They are indeed discerning who realize this and become beggars, imploring of God for grace. The millions who are wrapped up from the first moment of awakening until sleepfall in their small affairs, who do not know any kind of life other than the personal egos, need help as well as do the questers. It is religion's business to give them peace, comfort, healing, and hope. The popular religions are intended to help the larger number of people who are not ready for the deeper truth of mysticism, let alone the still deeper truths of philosophy. My kingdom is not of this world, declared Jesus. There is no indication that Jesus ever wanted an organized church. We may easily identify to which world these institutions belong, which were later organized in his name, by noting the official status which they secure in this world. This explains the historic opposition occurring at times between the true spirit of Jesus and the worldly behavior of his church. Wherever there is persecution within a religion of those who differ from the ruling authority of the period, it usually covers up the fact that the persecutors are greater heretics than their victims. For the founder did not come to preach hatred and cruelty. There is enough of that in the world for God not to need to send someone to increase it, but virtue and goodwill. So the persecutors, even if successfully established and long established, are not preaching his message, but their own, which contradicts it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Everyone with whom we are thrown into momentary or continuous contact is our neighbor, whether at home or at work. It is in these immediate contacts that irritations are bred, differences are noted, and dislikes appear. If you can take all these negative feelings and sublimate them into understanding, tolerance, and goodwill based on the teachings of philosophy, you are actually loving your neighbor in the sense of what Jesus meant. But that does not mean you must also love another's ill-mannered vulgarity, insensitive, crude commonness, unfair class, race, and national hatreds, or malice towards all and charity towards none. What Jesus meant was indicated by the last few words of his injunction, as yourself. The self which he recognized to be the true one was the spiritual self, which they were to seek and love with all their might. And it was this, not the frail ego, which they were also to love in others. You will then see that such philosophic love is far removed from and far superior to the hyper-emotionalism which blows hot and cold. The quality of compassion may easily be misunderstood as being mere sentimentality or mere emotionality. It is not these things at all. What Jesus taught nearly 2,000 years ago, and what the Buddha taught nearly 500 years before him, is still true, even more true, if that could be, for it has the proofs afforded by all history during that time. Hatred cannot end by being returned. Nothing will dissolve it, save a generous and patient goodwill. A smile to say to others what words may fail to do will express your basic attitude of, in Jesus' phrase, goodwill unto all. Thy will be done. Jesus, by his own example, gave this phrase a firm and positive meaning. Hence, this is better understood as meaning, Thy will be done by me. Every time we patiently crush a wrong or foolish thought, we add to our inner strength. Every time we bravely face up to a misfortune with calm, impersonal appraisal of its lesson, we add to our inner wisdom. Those who have thus wisely and self-critically surrendered themselves may then go forward with a sense of outward security and inward assurance, hopeful and unafraid, because they are now aware of the benign protection of their overself. Blessed are the poor, said Jesus. The phrase is not to be taken literally, but metaphorically. To live inwardly ever detached from things, whether they are owned and used or not, is a blessed state, giving peace of mind. Take no thought for the morrow. We gain new fresh strength when we refuse to worry ourselves into misery, when the possible or impending troubles of the future are left where they belong. To become as a child, in Jesus' sense, means as an invitation not to foolishness, but to surrender of all human pride. Become permeated with the happiness, with the joy which a child's freedom from responsibilities and anxieties brings. All problems being turned over to the higher power, the philosopher enjoys the same inner release. You may not agree with someone else's religious belief, but this does not mean that you should therefore be disrespectful to it. People come to God eventually through curious ways and through various ways. Their starting points may be completely different, but their lines of movement will necessarily converge upon the same point. Hence, you may correctly say that teachers, prophets, or guides are mediums for the Overself. While they are still embodied, still using intellects and bodies, egos, they can only be mediums, not more. They are the Overself, but working through and therefore necessarily limited by their human individualities. It is true that in the deepest rapt meditation, they can divest themselves of this individuality and become the pure Overself in awareness. But that is an unusual state, and you must consider them as they are in ordinary life. Jesus said that the way to eternal life is straight and narrow. He could have added that it is also long and difficult. Yet the beginner should not let these things be discouraging. There is help within and without. To find Jesus, you must go deep into your own heart. There is no other way. Jesus spoke in simple, crisp sentences about this great fact that heaven, the state of real happiness, is within us even here and now. I have told you all this, said Jesus, so that you may have the happiness I have had. This, then, is the ultimate truth, that in our inmost nature we are anchored in God, inseparable from God, and that the discovery of this heavenly nature is life's loftiest purpose. Even now, already, today, we are as divine as we ever shall be. The long evolutionary ladder that prophets and teachers, gurus and guides bid us to climb, toilsomely and slowly and painfully, need not be climbed at all if only we heed this truth continually, if we refuse to let it go, if we make it ours in all parts of our being, in thought, feeling, faith, and action. Quotes were taken from the notebooks of Paul Brunton. Paul Brunton, 1898 to 1981, a best-selling British author of a dozen books, spent much of his early life researching the original sacred teachings of Western and Eastern spiritual traditions. He traveled the world to discover and communicate with Christian, Kabbalistic, Vedantic, Buddhist, Taoist, indigenous, and Sufi masters. Blending the richness of his own spiritual experience and inquiry with these ancient and contemporary teachings, he developed a philosophy and path of practice that suits life in the 21st century, one that expresses the greatest wisdom and love available to humankind. Regardless of how it is named, we each have a divine soul, an overself or higher self, that is with us here and now, waiting to be realized. Paul Brunton's writings are a source of deep spiritual guidance for all those interested in living a divinely inspired life.